Teşekkürler. This is as far as I can go with my language. And thank you, Oider, for inviting me. And I have the honor of moderating this panel. Maybe we can tell a couple of words about your companies and your roles. Maybe I can start with Runar. Runar Mire is the Chief Information Officer of Bertel O Steen. As I understand, you're a distributor in Norway, but you're also a retailer. You do a lot of innovative things. Maybe you want to just say a couple of words on what you do to get people more familiar with your business.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, we are importer and distributor of the brands that was mentioned. We are Mercedes-Benz, Smart, Peugeot, Citroën, and now DS. And also Kia, and we have a dealer network in our control of around 185 dealers at the moment. Some of them are franchisees, but we're doing 60% of the business. So we're the second largest dealer group in Norway, and we are working heavily now to try and figure out what is going to be our new position in the value chain, because we finally see that this is changing, and fortunately or unfortunately, depends how you look at it, a lot of the innovation seems to be ending up on my table at the moment, because it's technology, and it's information technology or information and communication technology that's sort of going to be the future on how we're going to be able to control or to offer the best services to our end customer.
As I understand, the company is still family-owned, but is over a century old, right?
Yeah, it's a family-owned company. It's been in the car business for 115 years. And so you can say, okay, that's a lot of tradition. Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of knowledge in the company. But when you talk to somebody like Paul, who was speaking before us,
time to tomb.
It could be
time to tomb was a very fascinating concept.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept, and so the 150 years of history could actually be a challenge, because all the stuff that we bring to the table is always challenged by, okay, what's the business case? When are we going to make the money?
Yeah, and maybe we're going to touch upon these topics. And also Patrick Kattenkamp is president of Software International, part of Cox Automotive Group. Maybe a lot of people are familiar, but maybe you want to share a couple of lines on your business and your position.
Yeah, I think at first, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me here. Yeah, I think Cox Automotive is also surprisingly still a fully family-owned business, and the biggest, let's say, provider for the dealer automotive business in the US. So we make roughly $7 billion of revenue in the dealer space in the US, and has a portfolio of different companies starting from Mannheim, Dealer.com, AutoTrader, Kelley Blue Book. So I think in the auto space, especially in the digital world of the automotive area, I think 60% of the US dealer websites are run from Cox. 70% of all cars who are financed in the US go through the financing portal from Cox. So in the digital world is Cox in the US the biggest player, and is now internationally expanding quite fast.
So are you here also to buy other companies? Because I understand
we always look.
It keeps getting bigger.
We just entered last year with our own company the Turkish market, and Middle East, and we are looking. Like the presenter before presented, we made the experience that innovation is very often with buying or taking over some startups, very small companies who are usually moving much faster.
Okay. So our topic is best practices looking at the impact of digital in retailing. Runar, I know you like to think about services. You like to look at the way in which digital allows us to promote services in a new way. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, I think first of all, it's a mental shift. I think someone else was also touching on it a bit earlier today. It's like the product focus that we have today. We must admit that's what we have today. and moving into a service-oriented or a customer-oriented approach. And actually, we have to make a recent shift in our core values to say that, okay, the customer will be first. Customer first is our most important value as a company. And we must take the position of looking at ourselves from our customer's point of view to see what is it actually our customers want from us. And we must be willing to admit that maybe in the future it's not a car he wants. It may be maybe the next stage would be problem-free car service. Or the step after that will be just getting me from A to B in the most convenient way. And that's really changing the way we have to look at our business model.
Yeah, and Bruno from Brazil before told us about onboard diagnostics, and Pao also spoke about the baby monitor. Have you seen or have you done things where services have been taken to the next level? Or
yeah, we're in the middle of a onboard diagnostics project, and I think that's the connected car is a great thing to actually be quite technologically oriented and be supported also by the OEMs, so we can get more data about our customers. See, that's the biggest value we get from them. I mean, where are they traveling? When? Can we attach other services, like finding a parking spot, which seems to be, 30% of the downtown driving, at least from studies in Oslo, is actually trying to find a parking spot. And those types of services that we can add on is what we're going to exploit first.
Let me ask Patrick, because he mentioned the connected car. And the car is becoming more and more software. It produces data. It gives us data, and this data gives us power. And you also, within your software position, you can think of new things you can do. And what happens?
Yeah, I think giving you two perhaps concrete examples. One thing we did 4 years ago, let's say a project with one larger Scandinavian truck producer, where we tried to connect, where in the truck business it's, let's say, obviously even more important to have the full connection between the car and everything. And we did a proof of concept in one country to connect all the dealerships and all the trucks into one ecosystem, where you see then on the truck whether you have an issue, you see online whether what is the next dealership who has the parts on stock and has a free slot to repair the truck. You text in the navigation system that he should go there. And we did now a project the last 2 years with one OEM in China, where we did the same with passenger cars. And we are seeing this happening more and more, and we see that also for the dealers a huge opportunity in the digital world, because in the new cars buying or selling process, I think there will be a lot of other players coming in the service area. I think with connected cars, with cars online, I think that is a space where the dealers can own the service space also in the future very strong. And I think if you look on the regulations happening now, that in Europe, I think from 2018, every car needs to be connected. The legislation, how they are changing. So I think that the OEMs will not be the owner of the car data. It will be the driver or the owner of the car. And he will give the data to the dealer who trusts, not to anybody in the internet. So that's something where we see a lot of happening.
Yeah, because we talk a lot about who owns the car with the car sharing, but we have to talk more about who owns the data. And the data ownership is becoming more important than the car ownership. And going back to Runar, you mentioned the connected car, and you mentioned the way you like to think about services. Because you're a dealer, you're a distributor, do you see areas where digital is more effective, is faster in terms of contacting the customer or in selling the car and used cars and after sales?
Yeah, we see a definite shift into digital in both main processes, you could say, both the selling of the car and the service, the servicing of the car. And it's actually the demand from the customer more and more. On the sales, they've always had the fancy websites to learn more about the cars we offer. And we see that the number of visits coming into the stores now per car sold is as low as below 1. So some people are actually buying a car without even seeing the dealer, even without even doing a test drive. But if they want to do a test drive, they want to have a digital service for that. And that's something that we need to put right from the first place. And if we want to be very innovative, we still have to connect the dots in our traditional model. We cannot forget about that. So that's the oxymoron of where do we focus. We still have to have the automated digital services of doing the way we do business today in place to be able to go to the next level as well.
But if I ask Patrick, do dealers, is it possible for dealers to sell mobility services, or is it too early? I mean, is it for a typical dealer thinking of selling real mobility service, the way we're looking at the complete mobility service, or we already seen digital tools to move in that direction?
I think it's at the starting point. I think in the big metropolitan areas, I think it is possible and it is starting. And I don't know so well the Turkish market, but if you look into, London or Shanghai or so, I think it is starting in some of these areas, and I think the timing is also good, because if you look on the young generation, and Runar and I were a bit joking before that if you talk about digital transformation, you probably should ask more the people who are 15 or 16 where the world is going. And I think if you look also in some of the Deloitte studies, the importance for the young generation to own a car if they are grown up in a city is going down. So it's more to have mobility, to have what you need at a certain point. And I think that dealers also with the network and with the footprint and the access to the customers can play there a good role.
I'd like to add, I think they want both the mobility and they want the flexibility. We've been doing some studies just asking a few of our customers on what they really want. And Norway, it's not a very densely populated area. We have bad weather conditions, but we also want to go skiing in the mountains. And it doesn't really fit with being an urban citizen and having a cabin in the mountains for the weekend, because there's only way to get there in the cabin in the mountains. There is no train, there is no public transportation, so you then need a car. They want the flexibility. They want to have the smart car in the city and the SUV for the weekend. And how can you offer that in the model we have today?
And maybe flexibility can be sold at a premium.
Yeah.
Nobody says it has to be cheap, right?
Yep.
No.
So there could be money to be made.
I just give you an example of what's going on in our metropolitan, the only metropolitan city of Oslo, is that when builders were building apartment complexes before, they were all asked to put in at least one parking space per apartment, right? At least one, So in order to get the permission to build, at least one. And now there is buildings coming up with 300 apartments and 15 parking spots in the cellar.
So one spot per 20 cars, more or less.
Something like that. And what they've also done is they said, okay, what we're going to do when building this is we're going to put in a mobility service provider who owns those 15 spots and puts a collection of cars there with an app to hire them when you need them. And that's, of course, from our point of view, it's a scary thought. We get to sell their cars, of course, but who's now controlling the use of the cars and the end customer?
Because when we look at digital, sometimes people say, whoa, 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 digital is expensive. What is your view? Is it true or it depends?
I'd say on the contrary. It could be expensive. I mean, you see a lot of big articles about big implementation projects failed, trying to do everything in one. But if you look at digital in connection with your marketing spend, digital is really inexpensive. We've done some comparisons by running digital marketing campaigns and the effectiveness of those compared to the traditional marketing, whether TV or national newspaper, and the effects are really good at a much lower cost.
Yeah, I think one mistake you shouldn't do is to try to transfer your processes as they are from a physical world into a digital world. I think you need to take one step back and perhaps change the complete business model and not just trying to replicate something what you have done the last 10 or 20 years into a digital world. I think this can be expensive, but I think because also the business models and how you operate are changing.
And Patrick, do you see other barriers to remove for embracing the digital transformation?
I had an interesting discussion a couple of weeks ago with the head of IT from BMW, where I said when I was in a consulting company around 98, and in the internet hype, everybody was talking about new sales models for cars and things like that. And at that time, the OEMs were ready to do this, but neither the technology, the infrastructure was ready for it, nor the consumer. I think now, 15 years or 18 years later, the infrastructure is there, the consumer gets used to it, but the OEMs are at the moment, or I think the whole industry, including dealers also, is a bit hesitant to do that. And I think that is a big risk that, like I think one of the speakers before was saying, is if the dealers and the OEMs are not doing the move, then other players in this industry will do this move. Whether these are online platforms, sales platforms, or aggregators, or Google, this industry is too big that the rest of the world will watch whether something happens.
I agree.
Runar, how do you see this balance of power changing? Because digital is actually transforming the equilibrium. So dealers on one side, manufacturers on one side, third parties on the other side, big players, small players. How do you see the effects going from your perspective?
Well, it's difficult to say how it's gonna work out in the future, but I think the digital space is creating opportunities for shifting the balance. Unless we as a dealer group and as a distributor take the actions we need to take to be there when the consumer is ready to act differently. I think that's the key. I see no reason that we can't be playing that role. If we think the way Paul explained earlier, to test, and we say fail fast is a term that we use. We need to test some new business models in a small scale, and we need to fail very fast, and that means failing cheap. And if we can do that, I think we can protect our business and still be creating good enough services that the customer wants in the future.
Just to understand better, when you say fail fast, it means be fast in testing so you know as soon as possible if it works or not. Is that
exactly
the idea?
So you don't spend a whole lot of money testing out a prototype that the customer doesn't want.
Many seconds, many babies, many smartphones, like Pau told us. What do you think, Patrick, about this fail fast? Is that same logic for you?
Sorry, the fear?
Fail fast, and be quick, and
yeah, I mean, I have worked in the past for a couple of big IT companies, and I thought always it's a big mistake if you do huge projects, you plan for 3-4 years, and then either they fail or the time has moved already on until you're there. So I think we try also to rather take one market, make a small project, test it in the real world and with real customers and see whether things are working. And then if you have a great idea, then you can scale this.
And going back to the connected car, where do you see over the next months, next year or two, where do you see most developments will take place and most business will be when we look at connected cars?
I think one thing, one is in the past the OEMs were always believing that they will own the space, and I think that won't happen because I think the infrastructure for the connected car will be provided from the telcos and from IBM or Microsoft Azure or Amazon Cloud. And the owner of the data, like we said, I think will be the driver or the owner. So I think that that is then something where the dealers can occupy a big space in terms of service. And I think also we had a discussion before where we are planning to do a pilot with a leasing and insurance company in one country with connected cars. And for other players in this industry, it's not so easy to get access to a customer or to motivate a customer why he should come to a certain sales point or why he should do something. For a dealer, that is much easier. So I think if dealers have broad offering or even partner or cooperate with some other players in this area, I think there are also new business streams possible.
Thank you. And Runar, I know that beyond the connected car, you've already been testing something about autonomous driving, self-driving vehicles. Thinking about that, do you want to share some of your experience with us?
Yeah, we're in a pilot project with several different cities actually in Norway, and it's driven by the Minister of Transportation, who said this is really a good idea. So it's on his table as one of the means to fix the first mile, last mile situation of public transportation. I mean, if you commute, you take maybe, let's take Oslo as an example. You live outside, you take the train in. The station is not close enough to your work. You still have another mile, mile and a half, and it's too far to walk. It takes too much time. The weather may not be so nice. So in the customer's mind then, in that morning, he says, oh, my car is in the garage, so I'm going to use the car. And to avoid that, you have to have a high quality of service for the last mile. So what we're in now is a pilot project with several different players on having a self-driving minibus be available based on the data from, for instance, the train company of how many commuters are going into the business park, where we have set up autonomous minibus driving that route.
It's like a shuttle.
It's like a shuttle. It's on demand. It's app. It's on demand. You say, I need this many passengers to be transported on that route, and you send that many minibuses there to do it when the train arrives. So you don't spend time waiting for the normal route. You just hop on, and it takes you there. And then, when the business park is full with the people working there, the buses could be transporting the senior citizens around for their duties during the day.
Yes.
So this is, you say, okay, 5 years, 10 years, autonomous driving. Paul was also explaining how the Mercedes now is halfway autonomous driving. It has a way to do it semi-automatic. But now we're doing this in September. We're taking this into 5 downtowns with pedestrians on official roads in September. That's a pilot.
Thank you. Because the Congress is running a little bit late, maybe we will trim down a little bit of minutes from our panel, but there are still maybe a couple of things I would like to touch with you. Patrick, do you see digital developments making the world look alike, or there are still important regional differences. So the question is, also for the new generation, the way consumers are using digital technology, is the world becoming more alike, or are there regional differences that are important?
I think for sure the world will get a bit closer. Like the young generation everywhere uses WhatsApp and social media. So some of the backbones of the digital world, whether like Google or Amazon and so, will be global players. But I think there will be always a flavor of how do you do business of certain different things in the countries. And I think that will be also rather easier with the digital world, because you can combine different elements of Amazon or Google Maps with some local capabilities and create something new out of that. That's also, we just introduced our digital marketing capabilities for dealer in China. And in China you don't have Google, you have Baidu, you don't have Facebook, you have WeChat. So the whole social network community and digital side in China looks very different than in the US. So I think that there will be still very big difference in how do you do business and flavors.
Runar, maybe the fact that we are here, I'm from Italy, you're from Norway, he's based in Munich, but from a company originated in Australia, maybe it's a sign that some things are going global, some trends are going global.
Definitely.
So what is your view between global and regional differences when we think of digital?
I agree with Patrick. Something is still going to be local. The mentality of how you do business and how a transaction is going to be handled, I think is still, you need a local touch. But we also have Uber in Norway. This is an example. We all using Google. We're all adapting to the best solutions. They are available on the net. So we're going to be influenced more and more and converting into more global way of operating with the local flavor, I think.
Well, thank you. Maybe as a line to depart from this panel and wrap it up, maybe I could go back to Patrick and say, there are a lot of dealers in the room, and mostly from Turkey, as I understand. So what would be your advice, your message to them? You know, from your position, you work in a conglomerate, you travel a lot, you see different markets, different challenges for the dealers. What would be the one message you would like them to walk away with and think about?
I think like the CEO from the Brazilian dealer group wrote, I think the phrase was, if you don't have an own strategy, you're part of somebody else's strategy, which I think was a very nice statement. I think the changes in this industry will happen much faster than a lot of people think. And I think that if the dealers actively take a step forward to move into the digital space and take ownership of this digital space, that they have very good opportunities also for the future. If they wait, some other entries or others will do that. I think my point is not being afraid of it, rather taking a progressive step forward and driving it forward with new ideas and trying new things. And some things will work and others not. But trying to believe that the industry and how cars are sold will be in 10 years still the same as it was 10 years ago, I think is not a business model which will succeed.
So you are echoing some of the words mentioned by my friend Bruno. He said, even if we are big, but we have to be fast.
Yeah.
So being big is not an excuse not to be fast.
Yeah. No.
And Runar, if I would ask you the same question of...
Yeah, I would, I just, going back a couple of years in my job at Petrolsten, me and our business development director were probably the only two persons thinking about how we could use the new technology and what's going to change. Are we going from a product to a customer-oriented company? That was 2 years ago. Next week, we're taking half of the management team to Silicon Valley, just to get a feel for how the startups are working. and the automotive development companies over there, how they're thinking. Maybe not so much to get ideas to bring back home to execute on next week, but just to get the feel on how you need to be on top of the agenda.
The attitude.
The attitude. So my recommendation was, I mean, I see some big dealer groups in the room. Either you buy a startup that has the mentality that you can sort of set up as a clone, have ownership of it, let them do innovative stuff, thinking completely different thoughts, but sell in the same in your industry, because you need to look at yourself from the outside to be able to figure out what's going on.
And maybe this goes back to the conversation we were having right after lunch, and you were recalling that normally when you want a mentor, you look for somebody older than you, but maybe in these times we need mentors that are younger than us. They can plug us and connect us to the innovation which is taking shape. So I hope that probably the people in the room can take this advice to good use over the coming times, because that will be for sure very challenging, but also very exciting. We are witnessing the most profound transformation that anyone before us has ever lived. So it has to be a very interesting trip, but also dangerous, but that is part of life.
Maybe we could start by removing ties, right?
Yeah, maybe we can remove the ties. So I would like to ask you to join me and thank Runar and Patrick for their contribution and perspectives, and again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.